everyone. It's Tuesday. It's Harp Tuesday. And in this episode, I thought I would talk about something that I think I've touched on in some other episodes, but not really specifically talked about. And that is how sometimes when you're doing a really fast passage, an ornament, for example, a little sequence of fast notes, it can make sense to come off as soon as you get to a slightly slower note. So that while it might look as if it would make sense to connect, there are times when actually we want to use what looks like kind of a strange fingering in order to be able to focus only on that fast, fluid sequence of notes. So that is the opening for Deborah Henson-Conant's The Nightingale, which is a lovely piece. I've been having a lot of fun playing it recently, and I was working on it with a student this week and had this come up, and I've talked about this before with other students and thought about it myself, and I thought it would make it a great topic. So this has an example of that, where we have this little ornament, little sequence of fast notes. Now, if we look at that just as a sequence of notes, it would make sense to go 1, 2, 3, 2, 1. Then we're off, we get a left-hand note, etc. But the potential problem with that is that I feel that I can get a better and smoother sound, the type of fluidity that I'm looking for, if I go 1, 2, 3, 1, off, 1. So when I get to that eighth note, when I get to the slightly slower note, I'm coming off, even though we have another eighth note right after that. So again, it's kind of interesting, because when we first start playing, the idea of connecting is maybe a little bit peculiar. And it feels like a lot of work to have to think, oh, it's bad enough just to find the next note. You mean I have to find the next 3 notes and place them ahead of time? But advanced placing in advance on the harp is so important in order to be able to play quickly and be able to play fluently. And yet, here's an example where I think, even though if we were doing all these as equal notes, of course we wouldn't go, or we wouldn't go, or that doesn't make sense to come off every time. But because we have this slightly slower note, this little pause, to be able to just concentrate on that fast bit and remove any additional distraction, I think can be a very helpful thing to experiment with. Now, of course, we can also think sort of physically how this might affect that little passage. So I recorded some slow motion versions of this, and it makes a certain amount of sense that it's a lot faster to get the thumb here, or more clean. It feels easier than to put 2 back. So for example, if we're doing a trill, we could go, but while it's something we could practice, it's never a fingering that we would use. That trying to go from 3 back to 1 just is a lot easier for the hand. And again, in this slow motion, you can see that while I'm thinking of connecting to the thumb here, before I play 3, it actually gets on a little bit, tiny bit after the 3rd finger plays. And that means that lets that A ring for as long as possible. Again, if we're trying to have a really beautiful, fluid sound, letting each string ring as long as possible is ideal. And if we were to go 1, 2, replace both of these, we're going to muffle both the A and the B. So again, if I were doing 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, the thumb would probably lag behind. And it's not something that I specifically think about, but just as I'm trying to get the sound that I want, it just happens because of years of practice in the fingers starting to develop an intelligence and awareness on their own, as it were. Kind of scary. So this, even though this idea of 1-1 seems so peculiar, it actually works out really nicely. There's one other spot I want to talk about in this, and that's later on in the first page. We get this little. Let me play just a little bit more of the phrase. Again, it would make a lot of sense to go. Now we have 4 notes in a row going down. But it's a little more fluid to go 1, 2, 3, and then in this case, I find it easiest to move down to 2. Again, we've played some really fast notes, and then we get a slightly longer note, another 8th note, so that if you think about it, one of the harder things to do is to play 3 with 4 still on the string. Right? It's just awkward for the hand to do that because of the shared tendon. And so no matter how good your finger independence, I think it's always going to be a little bit easier. This is always probably going to be a little bit easier, maybe sound a little bit better than would like them to be able to do both of them quite well, right? And depending on what we have coming up next, and depending on the sound we're trying to get, we might choose to connect. But in this case, I'm trying to focus all my attention and all my effort on those fast notes. And as soon as I get to the slightly longer note, I'm coming off and then finding the next note. So something that's potentially handy, something and worth keeping in mind if you're dealing with really fast ornamentation or similar types of passages, that trying to be able to have the control that you want and the sound that you want on those fast notes, because we want this to, we want each of those to sound calm and unrushed and beautiful and yet go by quite quickly. And so by just being able to focus just on that and remove any distraction afterwards, I think that is a potential tool to keep in mind and have in your toolbox. So hope you enjoyed this. Hope you found this useful. And thanks as always to my patrons. I'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Cheers.